Hi guys, my name's Jeff. This will be a small review for the Tronxy X5S. The gearbest would be nice to send the Thehotend for review. Now, I've had it for probably close to 2 months now, so this is not a sort of a 5-day review or a 3-day review. This is actually, I'll give you a pretty good rundown on the machine and its shortcomings. It's also got a lot of pros as well. It's not a bad machine. You actually get a pretty large, build size for the machine that it is and the price that you're paying. I mean, you're looking at 330 by 330 by 500 high. So you can actually produce some pretty big prints on this machine. And the actual consistency of the layers that I've seen so far have been really good. So although I haven't tried to print that big, I can imagine that I'm not going to have any problems when I do. Now, admittedly, it did have a few problems with it when I first got it. We had a faulty power supply. We had which was just a DOA power supply, so either it didn't go through testing properly or I'm not too sure, but essentially it didn't work for me at all. So luckily I had a spare power supply which I used to get the thing running, and they did actually send me a backup power supply as well. Now, be aware that the hotbed is very large, so nothing less than a 20 amp power supply will do for this machine. Okay, so as far as print quality goes on the machine, before I get into the nitty gritty, I'll just show you I managed to get quite a few decent prints out of it. The actual layer quality was quite good. If you can see that, very good. But yeah, look, really, not a problem at all there. Retraction on this was a little bit tricky to get sorted out, even though it's got a standard size Bowden cable. Compared to a Kossel, which is probably about the same size, the retraction settings are completely different. So that took a little while. Now this City's probably one of the best retraction tests that you can get. Now that really, once you can get that not stringing, you're doing pretty well. So like I said, not hard to figure out. I ended up using the Folger FT5 profile in Simplify 3D. They do give you Cura and a profile for that, but like I said, I wasn't a big fan of the actual print quality I was getting out of Cura. So by all means use the one that comes with it, but if you've got Simplify 3D, I definitely recommend using it for this machine. I just used the Folger FT5 profile, as I said, tweaked a few things like the size of the bed and the retraction, and other than that, it's pretty much good to go. Okay, so construction of the Tronxy X5S was, I'm not going to say it was easy because the instructions that we got were a little bit backwards. So we ended up actually sort of having to go onto the net and find some better instructions than the ones they actually sent on the SD card, which we did. We found some updated ones which were a little bit better. Some things were backwards, so the end stop for the Y-axis, they want you to put it on the front, but there's no way that you can really put it on the front with the way that the instructions go, so ours is on the back basically. So other than that, there's not a lot of difference in the actual machine itself. As far as what went wrong when we built it, so we had a faulty PSU, so the power supply on arrival was dead, which they did replace admittedly, so that was fine. There was also a dead end stop for the X-axis up the top. The micro switch was broken completely inside, so luckily we have plenty of spares, so that was another thing that we needed to replace also. Now, the wiring itself can be a little bit messy. Essentially you're sort of all going to try and run it down the side of this right-hand machine and have your panel and have your control board down the front right-hand corner. So that's not really difficult to do in that sense. The instructions are a little bit backwards on that as well, especially with the cable chain at the back. There's a few things you need to look out for, especially with these little triple stacked bearings that you've got up here. I'll show you a picture of that in a second. Now these are not bad, but if you don't have them level around the top of the axis, they'll actually rub on the belts themselves, and you can actually hear that sort of a buzzing sound that you've got, and a couple of mine are actually still rubbing, which I need to fix up. It doesn't seem to affect the print quality too much, but what that will actually do is wear down the belts eventually, so it's probably something that I need to fix. Now, the construction of the frame's pretty good. It can be a little bit wobbly at times. make sure that you tighten up all of your corner bolts and everything else after that. Otherwise, the thing's just going to be rattling around when you actually go to print. Now, it's as far as the actual, when you've got it all tightened up, the machine is actually really sturdy. There's a few things you need to watch out for. The cable chain on top, just make sure it's not rubbing on the belts. As you can see, this cable chain is dragging on the belt here, so really you need to make sure this is all nice and tighten up the back here. Mine's tight, but it eventually sort of loosens and droops down, so before a print, always make sure that's sort of up rather than down. Now these things here, these are what I was talking about as far as the actual rubbing of the belts go. These belts will actually rub on these bearings here, so you need to be careful of that also. Now the control board itself will actually tell you that it hasn't got an SD card when there actually is an SD card in it. Now the irony, now the SD card, as you can see, is just in here. Now it's actually quite easy to get to. You're just popping it in and out. I print everything from SD on this machine, so that's pretty much where your main guts of it are. Okay, so probably a small tip I'll give you with the bed they've given you with this machine is, with the blue tape they've given you, it's not going to print ABS. It'll just end up curling up after a while. Now it's a two-sided bed, so you can just flip it over. So I just put capped on one side and put blue tape on the other side. So when you want to flip ABS, just turn it over. It's not too hard. Pretty straightforward machine. The loading and unloading is pretty easy. It's no different to, say, a Kossel with the side loading mechanism on the side there on the back of the frame. But the only downside to that is that you've got this Bowden here, which almost is unnecessary. The rail itself could almost support the motor on top, so I can foresee a mod that's probably already been done where people have put a direct drive up the top, which really would eliminate so much retraction and blob sort of issues. Okay, I just wanted to show you a couple of things with this machine. This fan here, instructions tell you to put it on the inside of the box. We couldn't get it to fit without touching the components on the circuit board, so we ended up just putting it on the outside. Not a difficult one. The spaces that they gave us just weren't enough to fit that fan in. Now, this back cable chain for the Z-axis, really, we ended up just having it free floating at the back here. Otherwise it was just being too stiff and was actually stopping the Z-axis from moving up and down. Now, as you can see, it's not the neatest wiring in the world that we've done here. The reason being is because we've actually undone it about 3 to 4 times now to find the source of a heat issue. Now, when we were using the bed here, the power supply that we used temporarily was only a 15 amp power supply, which was not enough. It was actually cooking the wiring when we used the hot bed. So really, I stress this, nothing less than a 20 amp power supply for this machine if you're going to be using the heated bed. If you're not using the heated bed, it doesn't matter. You could probably use a 10 amp, it wouldn't matter. Okay, the Tronxy X5S. Would I buy another one? Definitely for the price. For the machine size, definitely. As you can see here, I mean, the build volume is just massive. It's sitting next to a Modus which does 400 by 400 by 500. So considering the fact that this machine here, right, is some 4 times the price, really it's not too bad at all. If you haven't built a Core XY machine, it's going to be a little bit tricky, because they're definitely a more complicated machine to build than a Kossel or even a Prusa style machine. That's for sure. I mean, with your Prusa style machine, you've got standard X is left and right, Y is back and forward for the bed, and Z is up and down, and that's it. Whereas a Core XY, everything's sort of backwards on the machine itself, with your belts sort of all counter working with each other. To give you that XY axis. So okay, so just a good idea with this machine when you're first setting it up is to try and get this gap here obviously even on both sides. So just get a little set of calipers here and just measure your max distance there. Okay, so at the moment mine's exactly 8 mils pretty much all around, which is what the instructions are telling you to do for the default layer offset for your Z offset, sorry. So at the moment I've got mine at 8 mils pretty much all around here on both sides, and then obviously just the small adjustments with the thumb. As far as materials go with this machine, it did pretty well with just about everything. PETG, I'm just still fine tuning a little bit. I got a few little bubbles up towards the end of my print there, but you know, as far as an actual something clear, that's not a bad print at all. Like I said, just a little bit of bubbling up near the top, which needs to be resolved. That's really all just down to cooling and speed, but just a matter of tweaking that one. PLA, not bad at all. That's a nice PLA print. I've got a line there. ABS, not a bad ABS print at all. Quite clean, not too bad. A few sort of weird artifacts around the edges. Other than that, not too bad. And look, PLA, really never had a problem with PLA on this machine. Got some pretty good results out of it there, so yeah, not too bad. My control board didn't come loaded with any firmware at all. It was just a blank ramps board, so I actually had to go on and obviously find it, upload the firmware. Not hard to do, but if you've never used Arduino before, or Arduino, however you pronounce it, then you'll need to sort of look into how to actually flash your control board. One of the things that you need to be aware of with this machine is that the bed itself, although it is a heated bed, it takes a lot of juice. So if you're going to use your own power supply, or like me, the one that fails came with it, you need at least a 20 amp power supply minimum. This thing does get, you know, it draws a lot of juice. They do actually give you a glass bed. So you actually do get a glass bed with the machine. My one here, they give you a very large piece of blue tape, but eventually that'll rip and you end up using your own tape or whatever you like to put on the surface of your printer. They do come with the bull clips as well, so really there's nothing I could complain about there. Now there's no bed leveling on this machine. You do it all manually, you know, with the screws underneath and the springs, wing nuts, nothing unusual there. And personally I prefer that, because once you set it up and you've got it done right and the tensions are good, you don't have to play with your bed leveling really for a long time. Some other machines that are large, especially the large, the Modus that I've got here, that does a bed probe on 24 points before every print, and that can take some time. So this machine here, once you press print or it's warmed up and ready to go, you can just press go and off you go. There's probably a couple of things to note just before you start printing, especially to do with the top belts here. Now these small, these triple layered bearings they've got here, there's two bearings with sort of three washers they've got. These belts will tend to rub on the bearings a lot, and also too, you have to make sure these are perfectly in line with the stepper motors at the back. Otherwise, you get an angle like this and the belts actually end up sort of always being off, and that will also affect it. So if you can get everything dead straight, pretty much just look straight up. Mine aren't at the moment. I can even see one slightly off. So that's actually quite tricky to do. So, but you need to spend some time. If you want to get this machine, you know, absolutely perfect, that's really one thing that you're going to need to do. The actual prints, let's say without support, worked quite well. Now after 2 months, my cooling fan's actually died, so I'm going to need to replace that. So that's 3 components, I suppose, that have died within, you know, 8 weeks. The power supply was dead on arrival, the micro switch, and also to the cooling fan. Now, I'll be honest, that was actually printed without a cooling fan at all. And as you can see, it's not a bad print. There's a little bit of retraction blobbing under his arms there, but the actual print itself, really for not having any PLA cooling, is pretty good. Okay, so this is just a bit of a show on the layer quality. So that's the PETG there, which is didn't come out too bad. Had one little layer skip there, and I said a little bit of a problem at the end there, but not bad at all there. This PLA turned out fantastic. So not a light, that was printed at 0.1, of course, but you can tell, you know, it was worth it. That was when the cooling was working. No underhangs or overhangs at all on there. That was just fantastic. and like I said, the city itself managed to get that quite good without any retraction issues, which really on this you'd see straight away. Okay, so just in closing, the Tronxy X5S, let's say for an overall score out of 10, I'd probably give it a 7. It's definitely not a bad machine at all. For the size, the volume that you're getting of the machine, for the money that you're paying, I think it's fantastic. It's not a simple build. It's not an impossible build by any means, but it's just not, it's not a straightforward, okay, you're going to be, if you get it home at 8 o'clock in the morning, you're not going to be having it finished printing by 9 o'clock, that's for sure. It is going to take you a while to get ready and calibrated and things like that. The actual print quality of it, I'd definitely probably give it about an 8 at the moment. I can definitely get it better than I've got it going at the moment. But as you can see from the time-lapse video, even on something with quite a lot of detail, like this little ape that we printed, it's got some sort of, like I did sort of a chest sort of detail with the skin, and actually came out quite well in the print. I'll put some close-ups in the video after this, but yeah, look, I was quite surprised that they actually came out, because I didn't use a very intense brush with those. They weren't very deep in the model, so I was surprised they actually came out the way they did, sort of looking like that sort of skin texture. So, and that was only printed at 0.2, so I was pretty happy with that. So yeah, look, out of 10, I'd give it at the moment a 7. I can do things to this machine that will probably make it about an 8, I think. But look, as it is out of the box, yeah, look, it's a pretty good machine. There are a lot of other machines out on the market now that are comparable size, but they're actually still a fair bit more expensive than this one. So at the moment, I think now there's a special on this at the moment. I think you can get it for under $400. So on the Black Friday specials. So if you get in quick and use the affiliate links that Anthony will most likely put below, you can probably get a pretty good deal on this machine. So to be honest, if you're paying anything under $500 for a machine of this sort of size, then you're doing pretty well at the moment. I know the CR10s are pretty popular, but they don't do the volume that this does. So yeah, so look, anyway, so that was a relatively short review for this machine. Once I've done some larger things, I might post another video on it just to show you what it's capable of, but for now, it's performing pretty well and sort of doing the job that it needs to do. So I definitely would suggest going and grabbing one if you've got the room on your bench, because as you can see, it takes up a fair bit of space. It really is a little bit bigger than you would sort of like for a machine, in the sense of a delta here. Again, I can fit several deltas in the space where this is, but I can't do that volume with the width with any of those machines. So if you're doing sort of long parts, or especially things like car parts, or anything that doesn't require height but more width, then that's definitely a machine that you're going to be going for. Especially, you could actually do a full helmet on this, which I'm planning to do. I'm not sure which one yet, but probably whatever takes the least supports, just so I don't have to use too much plastic in one single print. So it's probably going to be a 40 to 50 hour print, maybe longer. But we'll see how that goes. So yeah, so look, I hope you enjoyed the review. As I said, not a bad machine, definitely worth the money that they're charging for it. And I think at the moment there's not really many in that volume that are competing at that price range. So yeah, if you've got the spare dollars, and honestly, if you had the room to fit 3 or 4 of these lined up, you could have a pretty good production line going with these. So yeah, so if I had more space, I'd probably consider getting some more. But yeah, so anyway, next video will be the Anycubic Cossel, and hope you look forward to that. Cool, thanks guys.
Two, 3, 4, 5, 6, electric.